thrilled that you are taking this opportunity. My name is Marcia Holland. I'm in Missoula, Montana. I was a career public defender in Alaska, but upon moving to Montana, I started teaching at the law school here in Missoula, and I've been involved in We the People for about 20 years. So a couple years more than you've been here.
I'll go ahead. My name is Ben Glickman. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the state of California. Much more importantly, I'm an alumnus of We the People and was lucky enough to be on a national championship team way back in 1995. So I've been involved in one form or another since then. And you can see we're in the House Intelligence Committee room this afternoon. So it's just like being on Capitol Hill.
My name is Candida Steel, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I live in Annapolis, and I've been with the program for about 20 years myself.
And if you can introduce yourself, and if you have your teacher or teachers or any mentors there, could you mention them as well?
Good afternoon. We are Reno High School's Unit 3. My name is Camille Dodson. I will be attending the University of Nevada.
I'm Samantha Sheppard. I'll be attending the United States Military Academy at West Point.
My name is Aiden Pearson. I'll be attending Loyola Marymount University.
And my name is Lucy Burnham. I'll be attending the University of Nevada. Our coach is Mr. Matthew Oakes, and our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
Thank you. And of course, it's no surprise this year in this competition that there is only one question, and it is question 3. So I will begin reading it, and then your time will begin when I am done. It reads, in 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? You may begin.
During the 1914 meeting of the Federation of Women's Clubs in Chicago, Carrie Chapman Catt proclaimed that women are not in rebellion against men. They are in rebellion against worn-out tradition. For her, women's suffrage was not only a political goal, it was the next logical step in the moral evolution of humankind.
In 1943, Alice Paul rewrote the text of the Equal Rights Amendment, or the ERA, to its current wording by modeling the language of the 19th Amendment. Both provisions state that the equality of rights under the law and the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Further, both amendments have enforcement provisions, ensuring Congress the power to enforce this article.
Conversely, the ERA does not specifically state what rights shall not be abridged, unlike the 19th Amendment, which explicitly protects the right to vote. It also does not explicitly state that only citizens are protected, but mirrors the 14th Amendment by leaving its protections open to all people. Further, the ERA has a third section which states that this amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification, granting the states enough time to oblige to the protections outlined in the amendment.
The ratification of the 19th Amendment, which was upheld in the 1922 case Lesser versus Garnett, was a progressive advancement in helping achieve equality between men and women in the United States. The provision did not directly enfranchise all women, like Native Americans, until 1962, when all states, using their power outlined in Article 1, Section 4, granted Native American women the right to vote. However, the right to vote helped women push for legislation like the 1963 Equal Pay Act, making it illegal to pay a woman less for doing the same job as a man.
The passage of the 19th Amendment had no significant impact on women achieving equality with men around the world. Before its ratification, more than 20 nations, including Germany and Great Britain, had already guaranteed women the right to vote. Even now, countries including Saudi Arabia and Pakistan still require women to garner permission from their male superiors, and they may even face violence at the voting booth. The 19th Amendment has not had a direct impact on the evolution of the status of women in those countries.
The amendment process, outlined in Article 5, states that amendments may be proposed by either the congressional or conventional method, then approved by 3/4 of state legislatures or conventions. The passage of the ERA at the national level ensures that the equality of rights shall not be denied or abridged on the account of sex for all persons, due to the Constitution being the supreme law of the land as outlined in Article 6, Section 2. However, when proposing a national amendment, Congress institutes a 7-year time limit for its ratification. This originally prevented the ERA from being passed and has led to controversy on the validity of Virginia's recent ratification of the provision.
Another path to ensure equality is to allow the states to ratify their own ERA. This permits the states to act as laboratories of democracy, which provides a guideline for what changes may better the nation. Prior to the passage of the 19th Amendment, 26 states and the Territory of Alaska allowed women to vote. Currently, 25 states have their own equal rights amendments. However, the amendment process is extensive. In Nevada's Constitution, Article 16, Section 1 outlines that an amendment must be agreed to by a majority of all the members of the two houses and referred to the legislator the next to be chosen, then approved by the people, which may discourage states from passing their own amendments. In 2017, Nevada ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, but is yet to ratify a provision to its state constitution.
Whether it be at the federal or state level, the avenues used by equal rights activists in the United States and throughout the world have led to a better, more promising land for all people. As Mary Wollstonecraft said in A Vindication of the Rights of Men, virtue can only flourish amongst equals. It is towards this virtue that we tirelessly and endlessly march. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And if you can put your notes away, and I believe Judge Glickman has the first question.
Yeah, so my question is, why do we need the ERA? Why isn't the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment enough?
I absolutely agree that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment is enough and the Equal Rights Amendment is not necessary. For example, in 1996 in Virginia versus United States, the court declared that the Equal Protection Clause was enough to justify that the Virginia Military Institute had to require women for admission.
I would like to disagree with my colleague Sam. The Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment is not enough because currently, as established by the case Craig versus Boren, sex discrimination falls under intermediate scrutiny, which is not as powerful as being under strict scrutiny. If the ERA became an actual physical amendment, then the protections of sex discrimination would be against sex discrimination would be much stronger under strict scrutiny.
Agreeing with my colleague Camille, strict scrutiny as established in Korematsu versus US requires a compelling state interest that's narrowly tailored and least restrictive. And since race is held to this standard, it's not fair that gender is only held to intermediate scrutiny. And if it was held to the same level, then it would help non-sex discrimination legislation be passed and would further the equal rights of all genders in the United States.
Thank you.
Judge Steele?
Yes. Virginia became the 38th state to pass the ERA in January of 2020. Do you think that the archivist should just, in fact, register the new amendment and declare it's been ratified?
No, the ratification of the ERA with Virginia ratifying after the time limit is under heavy scrutiny by the courts and by the people in general. Right now, it is under the Senate. It has been passed by the House and not by the Senate yet to look at time limits and see if it is constitutional to eradicate the time limit that has been put on the ERA.
But the time limit isn't part of Article 5.
Exactly. With the time limit not being part of Article 5, this question will reach the Supreme Court. And without the support of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it is unlikely this will be upheld.
However, it's not part of Article 5, but it could be argued that under Article 1, Section 4, the Necessary and Proper Clause, that it is necessary and proper to put time limits on amendments to make sure that they are ratified in a timely manner.
And although it would be incredible if the Equal Rights Amendment was ratified, we would also really have to consider that some states have rescinded their ratification of the ERA, such as Nebraska and Tennessee.
Are they actually allowed to?
Article 5 does not actually say anything about rescinding your votes either, so the validation of those rescissions is also up for question.
However, there's a district court ruling, Idaho versus Freeman, in 1981, which said that rescissions are constitutional. This has not been brought to the Supreme Court, so the precedent for that has not been set.
So it sounds like that's going to keep lawyers busy for a while. So I want to switch gears. So even though there have been landmark decisions in, which are basically decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, for example, Plessy versus Ferguson led to Brown versus Board of Education, and the 19th Amendment still needed the Voting Rights Act to really give it some teeth. Even if the ERA were to pass this year or in a year or two, what issues do you think would still end up being litigated in courts under it?
So one of the biggest concerns of the more conservative parties is that we're going to have gender neutral bathrooms and get rid of completely gendered bathrooms altogether. And we can foresee that a lot of issues would come up of this because it is against tradition. A lot of people would be upset, uncomfortable if a 40-year-old man was using a restroom with a 16-year-old girl, let's say in a school with a teacher and a student. So we could see a lot of Supreme Court cases, or maybe just one that establishes the precedent for it coming up on just that specific issue that has raised a lot of discussion.
Thanks. Judge Glickman, do you have a question?
Yeah, so this actually ties right into that. Is it ever appropriate for the government to distinguish on the basis of sex or gender, to enact laws that draw a distinction?
There are inherent differences between men and women in which there has to be lines drawn. There are things about women that are different than men. The fact that men can't have abortions and women can. The fact that women have maternity leave and men have paternity leave. There are inherent differences that laws have to draw differences between. There are women's shelters that are meant to specifically protect women. If we don't have these distinctions between the genders, everything will become blurred and the protections of all people will be at stake.
However, some of the laws that they have created have been wrong, as we can see with Craig versus Boren, the Utah law regarding alcohol, where men had to buy alcohol at age 21, but women were allowed to buy alcohol at age 18, that was inherently unfair. So despite the fact that women might be more mature at a younger age than men, that doesn't mean that those laws should exist.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay. So I think I will provide some comments first. We're trying to make sure we stay in a certain order. Just starting at the end of your presentation, that was a great answer. Really interesting to point out just some of the natural distinctions. And I had not heard of that particular case where women can buy alcohol because they're more mature than men. But that's a really good example of—
You agree though, right?
Anyway, so when I was in college, the drinking age for everyone was 18. So I grew up in a different era because it was Vietnam and there were reasons for that. But in terms of your comments, that shows me a level of sophistication I don't know if you anticipated that question, but you really had some material with which to answer that question. I like the way you began. I think it's always good if you're in a simulated or real congressional hearing to catch the judge's attention. And the quote that you started with in the rebellion and starting back in 1914. And I really just liked the way your prepared remarks flowed. They seemed to be really well organized, used really good and concrete examples. And I especially liked when you walked us through what it takes to get an ERA passed in Nevada versus how much easier apparently it was to get the national version passed. I think that's really thoughtful to demonstrate. You've looked at what's happening in your state, and I commend you for that. So really good job. And then Judge Glickman, I think you have comments.
Yeah. So I mean, congratulations. I thought you guys did a really nice job. I've seen a lot of units from Nevada, and this is among the best I've ever seen. So that's great. In particular, I was most impressed during the Q&A. I thought your handling on my first question about why the 14th Amendment is not enough, it was perfect. You had one person come in and say, it is enough, the courts are ruling, via my case. And you had another person come in, and say it's not enough, intermediate scrutiny is not the same as strict scrutiny. And then you had the third person come in and tell me why that makes a difference, what strict scrutiny is and why it's important. And I mean, it was just a textbook example. I have a feeling you've prepared for that question before. But yeah, and it just went like that, I thought, throughout much of the Q&A, if not all of the Q&A, where you just had, you built on each other, you listened to each other, and you listened to us and actually answered what we were asking. So really nice job overall.
Exactly. I thought it was a lovely job. Thank you. It was a real pleasure listening to all of you. So I absolutely adopt everything my colleagues have said. As the strict scrutiny was great. I really appreciated hearing about Korematsu. That was very nice to hear. But mostly I want you to, I hope you've had a wonderful time doing this. Have you enjoyed preparing for it? It shows. It's clear that you're interested and bitten and think it's an interesting thing to have been doing. So it's obvious, and I'm sure my colleagues agree with me, that you'll be wonderful citizens. You'll watch the news every day, you'll go vote every chance you have. But I think that you have demonstrated that you're able to do a whole lot more for this country than that, although of course your vote's the most important thing you can ever do. But I hope that you, after this experience, will be interested in using your knowledge about civics and political science and the Constitution to represent us down the road. At the very least, be a representative or a local, maybe on a school board, as Marcia Holland. But you have the ability, it's obvious, to do more than that, to represent us in Congress, to be senators, to be lawyers or judges. And I look forward with great relief seeing all of you to rocking in my rocking chair in the nursing home, to know that your generation is going to be taking good care of us. Thank you. You've done a wonderful job. And thank you, Mr. Clark. You did a great job training these kids too.
I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to give the kids the experience, since we couldn't do it in person, and really appreciate the time, because it's been a godsend really to have this opportunity for them with everything else happening in their lives. So thank you guys so much, and appreciate the feedback and the time you've given. It's been an incredible experience, even despite all the barriers we've been facing as a society. So thank you.